the war and creating conditions in which it makes it very possible for peace to happen. And this in a context where the costs are rising. There's been almost 13,000 civilian casualties that are registered. There may be many more. There's over 7 million refugees from Ukraine in the rest of Europe, which is just a gigantic number. And the damage to agriculture, which of course affects the entire world in terms of looming and already visible food shortages, is estimated between $4 and $6 billion. There's also the possibility of nuclear war or contamination that we've discussed before. In this context, I'm here in Mexico City. Mexico has proposed negotiation as an elected member of the Security Council and a pacifist foreign policy within this country. And basically, it would consist of high-level caucus for dialogue and peace, as it's called. This would bring together the United Nations. They're hoping that the Pope and heads of state would also join in to open up negotiations, which have been very sporadic and have lacked political will in the past. All of this, it's nothing really particularly new, but it's a proposal that underlines the need for a negotiated peace in this context of a war that will have devastating impacts on the entire world. What they're hoping is that there will be some kind of a breakthrough to say that really this can't go on, despite the fact that both sides are betting that it will go on. And it looks like one of the major blocks to this kind of an initiative is actually the U.S. government, in the hopes that by drawing out the war, it will weaken Russia in a permanent geopolitical game of who will be the superpower well into the future.
Right, thank you for that, Laura Carlson. And Jackie Goldberg, I mean, in your early days as a student, you were part of the peace movement of the anti-war movement there, and Laura mentioned this additional draft mobilization of troops by Putin that apparently reports now there was a lot of pushback, and I imagine it was a pushback because there is a peace movement in Russia, whatever one thinks about what NATO did or about Russia's invasion in Ukraine, about what Ukraine is doing. Clearly you have mothers and sisters and wives, family members who are concerned about the body bags that are coming back, and now this this initial pull-up of troops. And Putin himself admitted that there were some mistakes made in this troop pull-up. But not only on that, but just generally your thoughts on where we are now, because the United States is continuing to pour billions more into this war. Jackie Goldberg.
Yes, well, I think this new move is a very dangerous one, this notion that these four areas are now part of Russia, because in one of the things that Putin said when he did this is that now that they are part of Russia, we will use, quote, all means at our disposal to defend them. Well, what that means is that they're going to try and hold on to them. They don't hold actually any of these four regions entirely, and one of them, I think, is one of the ones that the Ukrainian forces are pushing into, which is part of the northeast of Donetsk. And actually they're surrounding, I understand, the town of Lyman, which is a key staging ground for Russian forces. So that Russia has claimed this, I think, has made it dangerous, because now Russia will say any Ukrainian war efforts in those four regions are attacks on Russia. And that is a very dangerous possibility, because if he treats it as an attack on Russia, he may say that the United States' help is a part of attacking Russia now directly, which I think is a pretty dangerous addition to this. I also think that the whole notion of these four with this fake, we saw pictures of people going door to door to get people to vote. Now, when you go door to door to get people to vote, and you're under military siege, they're not going to pick to vote in a way that, because it was all public, it was nothing in secret. They handed the ballot open to the so-called person getting the ballots. So the whole thing was a complete farce. I think the danger in all of this is that the United States' support for Ukraine and Russia's really difficulty in keeping its own war effort going make it more likely that Putin will do something really outrageous and stupid beyond the stupid things that he's done thus far. And I think we're in a very, very difficult place right now in this war because the peace forces in Russia are being mutilated. They've been arresting in large numbers and putting them in very difficult situations. The repression is, even for Russia, above average amounts of repression of those who are voting against us. I think that Russia's biggest problem is, even if they can get some of these people to go into the military, they have not been trained. They do not know what to do. They will go and either be killed, but they're more likely to commit war crimes because they aren't trained and because they will be people who have no leadership that they rely on because they are not military people. They're civilians being forced into a new role. So I think this is a very dangerous moment in this whole Ukraine-Russia-United States issues.
Thank you, Jackie Goldberg. And Dr. Horn, Laura Carlson talked about a negotiated end to all of this. And, you know, many, even though quietly, have said that there has to be a negotiated settlement, that that's the only way to really end this conflict. And the attack on the Nord Stream pipeline, Indian Punchline says it kills that prospect for dialogue. And this whole blame game that is going on, of some pointing fingers at Russia to say they're responsible, and Russia saying, what do we have to gain? We have nothing to gain, you know, by this. And then you also had the member of the European Parliament, a former Swedish foreign minister, who thanked the United States for damaging the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, that kind of caused a lot of controversy, and people, the article also refers to Joe Biden threatening in February, before Russia began its military, you know, what's called a military operation, the invasion of Ukraine, that there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2, and said, quote, I promise you we will be able to do that. So, Dr. Horn, a lot of this is in play here, and at the same time, the point that you often made with the relationship of what's going on with Russia and China, the U.S. also announced some millions, $810 million in support of Pacific Island countries to counter China. Dr. Horn, your thoughts on all this?
Well, with regard to the pipeline sabotage, it beggars belief to think that Russia attacked its own interests. As I sift through the evidence, it seems to me that the possible culprits could be either A, U.S. imperialism, B, rogue elements within the national security establishment in Washington, or C, a combination of the above plus Poland, which has a bone to pick with both Russia and Germany. Germany, of course, being the major victim of the pipeline sabotage. Which brings me to the next point, that irrespective of one's analysis of what's going on, it's apparent that Germany is being hammered by this conflict. The Economist, the conservative British weekly, had a piece a week or two ago which actually revived the discredited 1945 Morgenthau Plan, which, in terms of revenge against Nazi Germany, suggested that this nation should be deindustrialized so it cannot create more havoc in Europe. And somehow it seems that that is taking place, since Germany was heavily dependent upon cheap energy from Russia and exporting to the large market that is China. The United States now has its eyes on both Russia and China. Germany houses 55 troops and some of the most important U.S. military bases overseas, including. And so Germany, this mighty nation of 82 million people, is seemingly a lapdog. And speaking of lapdogs, look at the implosion of the British economy, where you've had a collapse of the pound. I recall when the pound was worth $2.40. It's now almost at parity, 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar. And what's interesting is that Mr. Biden announced some months ago that he was going to reduce the ruble to ruble. when actually in February, before the intervention in Ukraine, the ruble was at 70s to a dollar. Now it's at 50s to a dollar, which means it's strengthened. And what's happening is that we're having a transition, not only a transition from the Anglo sphere, inaugurated in the 16th century, to a China, Brazil, Russia, BRICS-dominated sphere, but also we're having a transition from the so-called fiat currencies, principally the U.S. dollar, which is now undergoing de-dollarization, to currencies based on commodities. Russia is awash in commodities. China and India, you may have noticed recently, have been gobbling up gold. Former Treasury Secretary of the United States under Nixon, John Connally, used to say about the dollar that it's the U.S. currency, but it's the world's problem. And you see that with the strengthening of the dollar causing havoc from London to Tokyo. But that era might be coming to an eclipse. And it seems that there are those in Washington who do not want to see that transition take place. Now, with regard to this annexation, as it's being termed, I think that the fate of that will be determined by the positions of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the African Union, Mercosur, the Latin American Trading Bloc,